I come sometimes to believe the opposite opinion. But nevertheless, amount of students, the amount of busy energy on campus, which is typical of any positive campus, is remarkable. The change is remarkable. The amount of new buildings. Just to get to meet Professor Hassan in his office in the morning for a 10-minute brief, we took something like 12, 13 turns. If I didn't have somebody with me on the way back, I wouldn't have found out. Although I do have a very acute sense of orientation. Wow, something big is probably happening wrong. Congratulations for such a department, which is hard to find in our part of the world. The only substitute or alternative is creative Shurun Tabliqiyya that belongs to Cairo University. And design in general as a discipline needs a lot of reorientation. I'm not here, sorry to disappoint Professor Carson, but it's not a big lecture, and it's not a scope, a wide scope of work and my interest in design, but it needs reorientation in the sense that it has to make sense, it has to make a livelihood for others, it has to be in service, and it is not about the luxurious and frivolous and non-necessary. In our part of the world, I always teach my students that how the Bauhaus started in Germany post-World War I is extremely important to study, to scrutinize, to have a look at, to exactly see that Walter Gropius did not drive a big car nor his students into campus. They hardly had money and they hardly had a conviction with the industries or with the government to provide them with support. But the Bauhaus was created and it affects design in our part of the world and in others till today with a tremendous flux and a very positive flux. So I'm speaking today about something minuscule in my practice, in my experience, which is the design of a font, which hardly happens in this part of the world. I'm not speaking about my furniture, nor about my architecture, nor about my textiles or products. But we have to understand, as designers today in this auditorium, that somehow all of them are always and continuously included in designers when they eat, they're designers, when they whistle while taking the shower, they're designers, the cupboards are like designers. I remember once with my mentor, Hassan Fath, he was so disappointed that the security at the times of Nasser broke into his place. So the story was that he was so disappointed to find the Brahms long play placed beside the Stravinsky. And this meant that somebody broke into his flat. To have the Brahms beside the Stravinsky was a complete mess on behalf of the security that played with his books to see what is he reading, what is he listening to. But the deduction of Fathi was nothing material except that the Brahms long play, discs, at that time he had discs from gramophones, was placed beside the Stravinsky. And that means that somebody must have broken it. A font is nothing to really fiddle with. Font, from my modest experience, is a very, very difficult task. I stumbled on it by complete ignorance. I thought that back in 1981 or 82, I'm going to make a nice business card for myself. And I had the opportunity to have the support of a very good and enthusiastic English, British designer working for a friend of mine at their advertising agency, which was one of the first to do proper graphics for its clientele. I was not a client, I was a friend of the owner, and Miss Andy helped quickly in understanding my sketches for this new font. An experiment that lasted maybe a month until the first cards were out with extreme strenuousness because, as a matter of fact, It was new to the print house, new to the designers, new in its thinness, in its sharpness, and there were problems in the print house expected. Leaving the story aside, it was accomplishing and fulfilling back then. Mid-90s, I had the director of Time Life magazine as a client for myself and his wife. They had some interior design and some furniture that they are proud to have of mine in Huntington together. But one day I got a call from New York after they left Cairo-based, and they said, Bill is looking in the internet for your font that's on your card. I said, you should have told me, you shouldn't have looked for the font. There is no font on the internet for my card. It's my invention. So Michelle, the lady wife, who's an art historian and a very clever one, said, it's amazing that you designed this font, but it's close to this, close to that, but nothing like it. He closed the phone after a long conversation about family, about what happens back when you leave Cairo, back to Manhattan. They had to pay the movers for the furniture, were paid the sum of the sofa that they purchased from my last collection before leaving, just to move it up to the third floor in a brownstone building with a narrow window. Regardless, when I closed the phone, I thought that maybe I did stumble on something while not realizing its importance. And the story stayed sleeping until back 3 years ago, I came across somebody who helped provided a second initiative due to his admiration of this font. Meanwhile, all friends, all clients said, this is a nice font. People can say so complimentatively, I never took it seriously. But some friends said that however you develop, never change this font nor this art. Regardless, 3 years ago we started investing in digitizing this font. The design is the same. We kept on going back to the initial sketches, to the initial hand-drawn scribbles that were seldom, not much, but just to keep exactly the same spirit, exactly the same characters, exactly the same relations that were born back in 1981 or 82, 81 I think, or 80 even, and try to digitize it. And that's the story I'm going to present to you today. Digitizing the font is a horrendous effort. Again, I went in it thinking that after 1 week we will have a DVD with the font digitized and that's it. We went in from Photoshop to Illustrator to Word to this to that. Doesn't work. It's a matter of extreme precision, and all the architecture principles that we design on campus with, you use the same principles to design a font. So we ended up after 3 years with a CD and not after 1 year. And thank heavens that there was the software that helped us initiate the final product. Without the software, Illustrator doesn't do it well, Photoshop, they don't do it. There has to be a software specifically for font design. And if I may, design awkward that always in all auditoriums you have to give your back to the audience or face the screen, and you end up facing neither nor, but nevertheless. Of course, those of you who are familiar with the terminology just to have this map at the very beginning tells us at what sort bends, at what sort curvatures and intersections do we look at in designing a font. Of course, this was done not initially. This was not done in 1980. This was done in, it's good I can see the date. I think it's 2007. This was done when we had to find the criteria with which to digitize it now. It's not hand-drawn nor hand-incised, but we had to find the criteria by which we're deciding thicknesses, curvatures, relations, and, after all, certain families. There is a model, there is a certain measure that we have respected, and this measure multiplied gives us a proper body with its flesh. Multiplied more, it gives us a fat letter. Shrinking the module, but with the same measure, gives us a very slim letter. And then there are letters that belong to each other because of their measure or their sonority. Whether they are letters like M and N, because of the geometric intersection that takes the vertical inclined to the next part of the character. Reminding you, when we say characters, we mean letters. So this is metaphorical and physical and functional, that they do have characters. Every letter is a certain character. And a character, of course, according to the dictionary, adjectively, has its properties that are different from the next character. The whole issue in designing an entire font is to keep a homogeneous family, that all these diversified characters, which I tried to write in the very introduction to the presentation, they have to find a way to keep this homogeneity and still act diversified. That is the major problem. There are other design issues that might bring into the scene new dimensions, new convictions, new expressions. You have to be very careful as a designer to edit them short, out, because they are not in harmony. They do not belong to this intrinsic family that you want to deal with. And definitely, I wanted to deal with sharpness. I'm an architect. By training, by vocation, it's in my DNA, it's in everything I do. So my font had to respect sharpness, had to respect proportion, had to respect a very incisive thinness, as if it's a knife. The more thin, the more strong. This is in the world of cutlery, the world of metallurgy. The more thin, the more sharp, the more strong. Not the thicker, the bigger, the stronger. It's a different metaphor. I had to as well come to terms with the pure Platonic geometric forms, whether it's a triangle, or a circle, or a square, or a rectangle, or an ellipsoid, but pure. And I have to express this purity as well. These are like conversations between the designer and himself, with long hours at night, with 3/4 cups of coffee, and if there is somebody around to have a conversation, maybe even none, with no conversation, all the better. This is why it can be a very lonely business. Here we were discussing at a close-up the inclination of the letter, the thinness, and whether to bisect it exactly in the middle or to give it a certain elongation by bisecting it through a visual trick, bringing it up one module. But they're all, again, born out of this first script. This is the B. And it's the B width. It has a family of letters that have the same width. It's the B width. The D has the same width as the B as well. And here we have insistently tried whether to smoothen the curvature, to make it one curvature as if it's an arch sleeping, or to make it into two curvatures, one for the springing of the arch and then another until it meets the third springing. We're saying here shift, that probably it is better to have the middle portion completely vertical. And there are arches that do this, coming from the construction world, from the structural world, from the architectural world, where I belong. The E, stay within the B width and the D width. Whether it should all be aligned, whether we brought down the middle syllable and elongate it further with probably an eighth of a module, all the letter, to achieve finally the B width. The F is a different character. It's the F width. Relations like this, you never, while reading a font, take care or take notice of them. But they do bring a sense of connectivity, as if you're bolting the rivets on a machine. They're well bolted. A machine can work with the rivets untied, but after some time you are going to hear its shaking, you're going to hear its movement, you're going to hear its crumbliness. Letters are the same as well. You have to give attention to every little detail. It gives it an extra life and it gives it an extra dimension of precision. And whether this inclination is at 60 degrees as well. It's not 57, it's not 56, it's not 55 and a half, it's 60 degrees. The H is the G width. We have to bring it apart and to bring the hyphen down below. The I, this is the final I, gave us, in Arabic, I, it's a sign for pain, it's a sign for anguish, I. And the I, although it's a monosyllable like this, but it gave us so much hard time until we've achieved it. There was always something missing. Between simply, like in Futura or Avant-Garde, it's simply standing with an incision vertical. Within this family of letters of mine, I needed to give it some extra meat, some extra head, some extra leg. And until we finally got there, it took so many experiments. So it became really I, out of pain or out of anguish. And maybe it's this I that brings the ego forth in the character in English when we say, I am a designer, I am great, I am Napoleon, I am. It's this ego inflation, although it is a letter simply by making one vertical line. But it's so inflated with meanings, with characters. The J width has the same L width, and of course, the J is about a horizontality meeting a verticality, and a verticality connecting with a curvilinear. It's quite problematic. It's not easy at all. And we threw the curvilinear out of the letter sometimes. In composition, then you put the letters together. You realize that one of them, as the term in Arabic is, when we say to a carpenter who, let us say, has all these craft terminology are different than the scientific hand glovery that we've seen at the beginning. But they are very typical. A carpenter who presents, let us say, a table, if this is made out of wood, and it doesn't stand correctly, we say that the table is sakran. The tarabeza sakran. So sometimes the letters were very controlled, very precisely formed, but they were drunk. And visually, when you put them with the rest, they appear as if they are off axis, off gravity, as if they're drunk. So we use this terminology between us while digitizing. No, it's drunk a bit. Bring it back to its soberness. So eventually we took the curvilinear ellipse of the J back so it does not protrude out of the center of gravity of the letter. Meaning to say that this became our controller or matrix. It does not protrude out like in here. Okay, very funny character. It's like a kick, you know, or like soldiers walking with their legs spread apart. It has to have this agileness and this kick expression, but it has to be still very controlled, very gravitational. And it belongs to the B width. In my family, it belongs to the B width. The M was not easy as well. For certain other reasons, we will come to them slightly later when we see the digitizations. The P had something to do with the D as well. Not in width, but in the formation of the curvilinear meeting the horizontal on the stick, on the vertical stick that holds the P. I wonder why is it very popular in Egypt to have this common. Became funny now because it became a phenomenon. Whether we say B khafifa or B thaqila, people always relate it to a certain gravitational pull. And it's important. It's funny though, how they mix it up saying, for example, what?
Pepsi.
Pepsi, but Pepsi is Pepsi. But
Pepsi is called Pepsi and a lot of
yeah, but there are much more funnier ones. I'm sure we're all aware of them. But to me, it was a signal that for the Egyptian sonority, there is some gravitation to the letters. And it's either ti'ila or khafifa. He didn't say tikhina or rufaya. He didn't say tawila or qasayara. He didn't say tall or short, slim or fat. He said heavy and light. So it had something to do with the forming of the letters as well. Whether they're heavily gravitational or agile, as we said, the K has a lot of meat, has a lot of matter. But it has to be agile with this kick. Like the soldiers walking in a march, they're heavy, they're strong, their march is heavy, but they all look agile. The R had something to do, most of it, all of the letters in general, I think in all languages, and I have a conviction that particularly in some more than others, but all written letters have something to do with the sonority, movement of the pharynx, the larynx, the lips, the whole mouth, and eventually the tongue. They are a vision after a lot of complete adoption of the body. Complete. I hope anybody who's listening doesn't think that breaking the module in 5th grade is allowed. Now, it might be in your 50th year, you're allowed to break the module, but not before, or the proportion, or the measure. The S, although its image was clear since the very beginning, but it was tricky as well. And it was one of these letters that when you decide on two symmetrical, curvilinear, open forms above each other, it gives you a drunken letter. It has to move. One has to be more closed than the other. If it is fully symmetrical, it doesn't stand correctly. It shifts back and forth as if it has a belly, as if it has a tummy that takes it forward. The T, again, realize the detailing here. We're fiddling with the sharp edges of the cut of the horizontal or of the vertical. See now how certain experiences feed the new. It's good that I did scribble this, because the relation of the two verticals meeting the curvilinear has to follow suit from the old P. It's not that every letter invents the whole world. They have to converse with each other. They have to have it's like this beautiful factor of creation where we say that Professor Carson, you remind me of your grandfather. You know, you're not similar. You're not a reproduction. If you were a reproduction, it wouldn't have been so interesting. But it's more than interesting. You remind me of your grandfather. So there are things that, you are a mixture of both mother and father. You remind me of both. When you move, you're more father. When you are static, you're more mother. All these genetic principles in design have to find a way in translating them physically into your exercises. The V has the S width, and we realize as well that we've put the V on a base. There were other instances where the V met the baseline at a point, and it had the arms open at a point. But we decided to have it with a base and the arms to be cut horizontally at the end of the horizon line. You see here, we were fiddling whether to be at a point at the W, point, or to have it with a baseline. And this was the new W, and it has the A width and the M width. One could have easily said, let's take the W, invert it upside down, it becomes an M. Design doesn't happen this way. This is why in the computer world, particularly in Apple, there are certain orders that I completely forbid my assistants, my students to work with, like stretch, like shrink, like invert, and others. But these are enough. Stretch, shrink, they belong to the world of Lycra, but not to physical design. All the girls and ladies know about Lycra. and some men do at the moment. But Ernst and Lica, inversion is not a typical thing of designers, because you have to always have every piece of design oriented with the head, with the leg, with the north, with the south, with the right arm, with the left arm. Like you cannot be inverted, and you cannot be inclined. But you can work in inversion. If I pick up something from the floor, I have my head inverted only. But I'm not supposed to lead. Not all activities are done for inversion. This is why you have a vertebral column, you have a certain elasticity, you have a certain ability to curve in on your body, but not for all matters, not for reading, not for eating. Any doubts? Try it, but far away from the auditorium. The X as well can be simply just a cross, but it risks becoming the multiplications. Of course, the X as well, you have to realize that every character has some action that we are expressing. So while speaking to they should have been worth recording, but we didn't. We didn't know what we were doing. We just wanted to finish because the amount of expenses and amount of work hours was humongous and getting out of control. The pleasure was increasing, but it's a money drain as well, an effort drain. But the pleasure was irreplaceable. The letter is an expression of a certain action as well, where we say the X is like the scissors. The X has this X, it cuts through while your sonority says X, it's an X, X. It cuts through something. It's not as soft as S or as M. So we moved the fulcrum. We used the word fulcrum. We had to invent our own terminology. We said we moved the fulcrum up third module. Why? This is one of the irregular letters because I dared with the Y taper the matter. Taper, meaning that it begins with a dimension and it ends with a thinner dimension. There is a certain tapering. This comes from my experience with furniture design. Sometimes we taper the leg of the table or the leg of the chair, or we taper it. Majority of the furniture of the 60s is inclined and tapered. You understand the word tapered? Tapered, yani? Sorry, I forgot. I do have the lessons here, but I forgot. We start here by, let's say, 1.2 centimeters or 1.2 millimeters. We end up there by 0.9. Or we end up there by 0.65. You understand tapered now? But realize the numerology that I'm familiar with, that it is all based on a 0.3 model. 1.2 is divisible by 0.3. 0.9 is divisible by 0.3. The 6.5 is divisible because we took a 0.15 out. But we didn't say 0.7 and 1.3. Doesn't connect. The last letter, which I'm very fond of, I love this letter maybe because my name comes from the very beginning of the alphabet. So I'm always in love with this last letter. That's the Z. A lot of work happened at the Z as well. A lot of work. And the Z, although looks with a wide base, you would say, taking things for granted, that probably it's an easy letter to have its gravitational pull. axial, vertical, and it's easy. It's easy to lose its weight with the rest of the letters. It can incline or trip over you. So we have to control back and cut back to control its center of gravity in and inclination change. We had to change the inclination of the Z accordingly. Then we had a problem here that got solved eventually brilliantly because I didn't want the inclination to meet simply the horizontal. I've learned that in architecture, the place for ingenuity is the place of intersection. And Deleuze, a philosopher, nothing more, nothing less, said that as long as you have this, you have no design. Materia prima, no design. The moment design starts is when we do this. Just the bend. The bend of the surface is the start of design. But as long as you have a surface, no matter what, there is no design. It's like the textura for a textile manufacturer. It's like the wood contreplaqué for a carpenter. It's like no design. The moment you decide to bend or curve even, that's where design starts. So the belonging of the inclined body of the Z meeting the base was an opportunity for something. When design gives you an opportunity, design field gives you an opportunity, the designer has to use it. You don't create it. You don't move around creating design. One of the principles I have learned early on from my mentor, Hassan Fathi, is that you have to refrain. A real designer is not in search of an idea. A real designer has 50 ideas to put in a small cup. And he has to discard, 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 until he has half an idea that fills the small cup. It's not by addition. It's by subtraction. We come back to the, this is one family, on, I think, now two, but it's the first sheet. These are the groups of letters. Eventually, the F and the P stayed alone, same width. The G and the H, the I stayed singular, of course. Realize now the harmony that suddenly, but not suddenly for us, the harmony that starts to appear between all different letters. The modulation, these are the closest. We were experimenting with the closest to see where did we differ, where did we agree, where did we brilliantly make a breakthrough, where did they make a genius invention. Avenir Light, Ginson Light, Ahmad Hamid Light, and Rockyon Light, and Universe Light. These are the dimensions, the specifications of each letter. And then in diminuendo or in crescendo, like in music, we fiddle with it, with some of them to see how do they look like, grouped together, arrayed together, just to fiddle with. It gives a dimension to the letter in imaginative space. This is not in physical space. And that's when we digitized all our hand-drawn exercises. This is the kind of detail we had to go through. Whether it's an ellipsoid pure or we have to break with, and we have to incline instead of 60, it becomes at 30 and so forth. And this is where we're starting to see the pure and then to cut from the pure. When you cut from the pure, you stay still, pure form. You still have your pure form. And then these are the mixings of the letter that belong together. Again, they provide us with opportunities to see if there was some further adjustment, further opportunity to make them speak exactly, correctly together. If we are to speak together in a perfect manner, we would sit exactly facing each other, exactly looking at each other. This is the purpose of grouping them all on top of each other as if in layers to see where there is a further adjustment. Although this is again in imaginative space, you will never read them on top of each other. Some friend of mine close to my work, and I'm very grateful that for some of such friends, they do have a great admiration for my work. Alhamdulillah, I'm extremely timid and shy, and the most of the time completely ignorant of what I'm doing. I just have to do this, that's all. Whether it's good, bravo, no bravo, I don't care. So a friend of mine said eventually that all these letters somehow are found in your architecture. And I never thought of it before. It's completely her invention, her deduction, to her amusement and to mine. But, of course, she made a whole research on it that maybe one day she's going to do an exhibit with it or something. But somehow after 2 or 3 weeks, the idea sunk in that maybe a couple of letters at least bear a direct relation to my architecture. So this is a facade of one of my works, and it's inverted, and it gave her the same proportionality and sense of direction that is embedded within the U. Here is the Z. We dared even take the Z with a little swellingness out of control, but there is a story to it until we came back to the appropriate measure. It was too much, but we dared. We were probably, by the time we arrived at the Z, fully aware of what we have at hand, and in control of the measures of the intersections. So we dared with the Z to fiddle with a lot of audacity and a lot of breaking the rules. See, the space here is not the same as the space here, where you would assume, and this is how we assumed, and this is how we started, they should be same. These are the letters grouped together. This is an insistence, a highlighting of where there were problems, and we continuously veered away from the problem, alternative solutions to the opener of the G, just to give you an idea how strenuous it can be. And then this became too much of a Givenchy G, and I hate to have these syllables within my work, or my dress, or my environment even. The J with its bunker. Q within the flesh of the bee, and it has its public space in between the B and the next letter. And some of the spaces are privately divided, like the B. It doesn't have a homogeneous private space, but it has a space with two alcoves. I use the word alcoves, like here. So you have to see this particularity. Do you want to accentuate it? Do you want to subdue it? Do you want to emphasize it? Do you want to keep it in a submissive format? Do you want it out loud? Do you want it controlled? You have to decide as a strategy within your font making. C. Infinite solutions for this cut. Infinite solutions. And all of them valid. But one is more problem. And we had something like 25, 30 C's. But one of them fits our family correctly. The D as well, the relations here. The I, eventually, I found just this little tip and this counter tip at the head. When we did this, it was like big victory. And it's just minuscule piece of meat added to the bottom of the verticality and to the top taperness of the stick. It was like a big victory. K with its kick, but see how the major secret of its agileness that it does not intersect with its base line, vertical base line. It touches. There were other opportunities where the K fused into with different relations, all of them geometric, all of them proportional, until we said, let us just touch. And then we made a print. We went to the print house to make sure that in printing the letter, it does not shift, it does not get completely fragmented. So there is a small insertion. You wouldn't realize it, I would, but this comes from the industry world, from the printing house. It says to guarantee that you never have it completely loose, just insert it a bit. No, the eye cannot see it, but for us, the print house, we are more comfortable like this. Of course, this is the best print house here. In Switzerland, it would be a different dialogue. You would say, no, I can do it. So you have to as well, after all, when we finished, we were completely paranoid that it can come back from the print house a mess. It can. So you have to respect the ability as well within the locale. What sort of ability does the print house, the machina, the person that is controlling the machine, is he able to, the amount of ink, the kind of ink, the blottingness of the ink, the paper, the shrinkage of the paper, the absorbedness of the paper, and so forth. I think the problems we have in Egypt in this case extend our design abilities. They give it more strength. We can say, it's not like Switzerland, it's not like Germany. That's easy talk. But it gives us an extra dimension to solve all these problems with all the current circumstances. I hope I'm not too long for you. I'm running through to the end of the, I just point the Y, the W here. See how sharp the dent within because it's like an intrusion within the private space of the W. Meaning to say, like an architecture and thinking, all the space between the left wing and the right wing is the space of the W. And then comes an insertion, it's an intrusion. It's like an arrow that comes into this space. When I said an arrow, that's the image that mentally moves my design. Then it has to have a pointing edge. Because if it's an arrow, and if I'm dealing with it as if it's an arrow, and then it has a blunt edge, it's nothing worse than a blunt arrow or a blunt knife, or you get what I mean? The X with its scissors effect. I think the X is tapered a bit, a very, very tiny bit. The X is tapered, like the W, like the Y. I'm sorry. Y is here. Is the tapering clear now? Instead of having this symmetrical, where all the symmetry, something wrong with symmetry. It doesn't exist in nature. Nature is never symmetric. So when you, as a designer, face a symmetrical situation, know that you are out of the natural. You're into the synthetic, into the artificial, into whatever you want, but you're out of the natural order. So just to have this stick with this thing on it can be a Y. But how to get it a bit off this symmetry? Is it to create a Y with the V this way or this way? But it's just to taper with the elements, with the arms, with the finger, with the Z, after all, final edition. Then we created first it was a test, the business cards for us and some of our assistants, who some of them up to today I don't think they know what a gift we made them, because some of them don't use it at all, although it was a very precious gift. But without a word said, we said we did you these business cards from our farm. He said, shukran. Well, that's it. And these were two options for the design. We're using both at the same time. The print house was extremely worried because it got a call every day from our firm to guarantee what we have agreed upon, to guarantee that it doesn't mess out because of the paper, because of the ink, because of the humidity, because of the mosquito, because of the farash that went on holiday, because of the lady that got pregnant, all these circumstances. And then we did the cover of the book. I'm very honored to have made this book. I'm very glad that the American University has received it personally through the efforts of the late Mark Lins, the director of the press. Brilliant man, brilliant man. The font used for the book eventually was a different font. Eventually. Because of certain inner reasons that have nothing to do with our presentation. But this was the demo. And I hope
questions?
The people we were working with, were they actually font designers or were you all kind of...
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked this question. I'm so glad you asked this question. How could I forget? How could I? They were not font designers.
None of them.
At all. We were breaking the program. We were breaking grounds, not knowing at all what we're stepping in. And I said, can you? I don't want to. I can take the strain. In my life as a designer, I took strain a lot. I would like to take less of it now. But with every project, with every idea, there is a strain. It's like the closest is, I think, you have to ask women when they get pregnant. It's a strain. Pleasure, nice kid, but forget all this. There is a very strong strain to bring an idea to physical reality. So I took the strain, I can take it, but I didn't want to impose it on my assistant. So I said, if we break into this, we have to come out from the exit door, not from the windows. But now we decide, can you go in with me? Well, shall I go alone or fetch someone else? Brilliant, and courageous, and dedicated, and with little education. They come from very modest university backgrounds, not like yourselves. They hardly come from a university that has such an auditorium without the glass broken. And they went into the design, experimentation, implementation, revision, final product with a lot of courage. And a lot of good stories and happy memories till today. Is Amr Morsi here? He should have been here. No, he isn't. He's my website as well. He did my website. But a very good question. Thank you. You should be, as a font designer in the coming, let's say, 5-10 years, in the market with different abilities. But as a matter of fact, back in 2007, the whole country doesn't have one font designer. After all these expenses, I'm not going to tell you about the calculation sheet, because it distresses me, and it will distress you. But I had a proposal to sell the font. You put it online, and it becomes Ahmad Hamid Heavenly Light, and you may use it yourself. You make nothing. They said, as a font designer, you don't make money, but you make a name. I said, thank you. I would like to make the money. And I do have the name, but I can't believe that this is your offer. It said this is the best offer for all international font designers. You don't make a penny, but you make a name. You make a name, you get hired next by some other company to make a new font, but this is not my business. This is where it ends. As a matter of fact, my assistants pushed me to do the minuscule, the small letters. I said, no, finish. There is no money and no effort. We're glad out now from the door, quickly. We finished the majuscule and we had the printing house agree that all are same, the kerning is proper, everything is working. Finished, basta. And as a matter of fact, this is the first time I give this presentation. We did the presentation back then as well, just to close the project, as usually we do. Close all its paraphernalia, marginalia, everything closed. And since then, the presentation was never given. Given where? To who shall I give such a presentation? To which audience, to which school, to which department? So I'm very glad that I came across a brilliant student of you, working with you. I will not reveal her name except if Professor Qasim would like. This is different. And I said, she said, would you come and speak about your furniture, about your designs, about... I said, listen, you said you have a graphic design department. Maybe they are interested in the font. There is this font. this presentation in the drawers now for 4 years or more. Are they interested? She came back and said, yeah, they're interested. So thanks to the department, or else this would have stayed in the drawer for an extra, I don't know. There are things in the drawers else than this as well. But I spoke to the American University in Iraq, saying simply that they said, this is a very nice card. What font is this? Quickly, graphic designers want to take the info. I said, this is no font you'll find, it's mine. Are you interested that I come to your students give a presentation? I said, no, not necessary. So thank you for this.
Thanks a lot. Pleasure to have this presentation and topic. I think it's hard to find anyone to talk about it because this kind of specialty may be not available all the time. So it's our pleasure actually to be hosting you here and to be with us today to do this presentation. Before I do writing some words here, because I know you will start your normal way. Nurhan will give you list for the consultation next week. I will sit with each one of you to talk about the mind map. So the sheet will come with